Hey guys, this is your host Thomas Tyree here from On the Hot Podcast. Today, this will be the Combat Series episode number 95 for you guys today. And to kick off this week's Combat Series episode, I'll be sharing my fight prediction for the main event of UFC 314 between Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopes. So, in the main event of UFC 314, you will see Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopes fight for the vacated featherweight title in the main event of UFC 314. The title is also vacated due to the fact that Ilia Topuria has vacated the title over the last few months and is moving up to the lightweight division. Therefore, Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopes will be fighting for the vacated title. Now, storylines heading into the main event of UFC 314. Can Alexander Volkanovski become the king of the featherweight division once again? Now, everybody knows Alexander Volkanovski, when it's all said and done, when his career officially ends, he's going to the UFC Hall of Fame. One of the greatest featherweights of all time. You can put him in the conversation for one of the greatest featherweights of all time with Max Holloway and Jose Aldo. But what Alexander Volkanovski has done and accomplished at this featherweight division will never be forgotten. He held the title for nearly 5 years, held the title from 2019 to 2024, 4.5 years in that time span. And the thing is about Alexander Volkanovski is he's heading into UFC 314 with a year layoff, and he has lost his last 3 out of 5 fights in the UFC, which is a little alarming for this fight. Because normally Alexander Volkanovski, somebody that's coming off of 2 knockout losses, would not be awarded with the title opportunity in their next fight. But Alexander Volkanovski is walking into his 9th or 10th straight UFC title fight. Even though, if you look at Alexander Volkanovski's 2 last performances, he got knocked out by Islam Makhachev in the rematch. And yes, he took it on a 12-day notice. No excuses. He got knocked out in the first round. And then months later, in his title defense against Ilia Topuria at UFC 298, he got knocked out in the second round and lost the featherweight title. And he's been inactive in the octagon since. So, Alexander Volkanovski, he's already 36 years of age, late 30s. This could be his last opportunity to win the featherweight title. And he's going in there against a hungry challenger in Diego Lopes, who's trying to become a world champion for the first time in his UFC career. So this is a big obstacle for Alexander Volkanovski to climb over in his opponent, Diego Lopes. We're going to see how much is left in the gas tank of one of the greatest of all time, Alexander Volkanovski. Can he climb the mountain once again and become the featherweight champion? Now, for Diego Lopes, is Diego Lopes ready for the biggest fight of his UFC career? Diego Lopes, since signing with the UFC, has been red hot. He's been slowly but surely climbing up the featherweight division, and he's gained a fan in me. I'm a big fan of what he's accomplished thus far, and Dana White and the UFC executives are very high on Diego Lopes. He's currently on a 5-fight winning streak and has gotten better each and every single time he steps foot in the octagon. Every performance makes him better and his stock has been building up to be a legitimate threat at this featherweight division. And he just picked up the biggest win of his UFC career, fighting Brian Ortega in the co-main event of UFC 306. Winning that fight, I scored the fight a 3-0 shutout in favor of Diego Lopes in that fight. So Diego Lopes is building momentum, but it's all different. It's a different atmosphere, a different fight. When the title's on the line and you're in the main event of UFC pay-per-view, we're going to see if he can swim in the deep waters with one of the all-time greats in Alexander Volkanovski for this title fight. But enough of the storylines. Let's get into the tail of the tape. So the tail of the tape is you have Diego Lopes. Diego Lopes has 26 victories, 6 losses to his MMA career. He has 10 victories coming away of knockout, 12 submission victories. Currently the 3rd-ranked contender at the featherweight division, stands at 5'11", with a reach of 72 inches. Then I'm looking at Alexander Volkanovski. Alexander Volkanovski's MMA record, he has 26 victories, 4 losses, 13 victories coming away of knockout, 3 submission victories. Currently the number 1 ranked contender in the featherweight division, stands at 5'6", with a reach of 71 inches. So this is going to be a really interesting matchup. But based on what I just said, the height and the reach goes in favor of Diego Lopes heading into this fight. So these are the following game plans that I have for these fighters to follow if they want to walk out of Miami, Florida with that coveted featherweight title. And these are the following game plans, starting off with the veteran and Alexander Volkanovski. I think Alexander Volkanovski is going to have to land leg kicks. He does a great job. When he gets the leg kicks landing, he does a great job controlling the pace of the fight offensively. When he gets the leg kicks going, whether he's landing the calf kicks or the kicks that are landing to the midsection, to the body area. When he lands that, where the kicks are landing to the calf area, the mid or the body, that slows his opponents down. And that helps Alexander Volkanovski gain rhythm and momentum offensively in the octagon, but also does a great job of walking his opponents down once he knows he can soften them up with some leg kicks. And also, I said it's good for him to land the leg kicks because Alexander Volkanovski, you guys watch him in the octagon, he likes to switch stances a lot, try to get his opponents off rhythm. And basically, that's a good way of Alexander Volkanovski collecting data as well as he switches stances to know what he's going to land, what he wants to land on his opponents. And that can help him fighting on the inside and landing the kicks as well. So I think landing the kicks is going to be very pivotal, very important for Alexander Volkanovski heading into this fight. I think Alexander Volkanovski is going to have to get to the third round of this fight. And some of you might say, well, why'd you say he has to get to the third round of this fight? If Alexander Volkanovski can get to the third round and get past the first, second round, because I think Diego Lopes is going to come out firing out of the gates. If he can at least get to the third round, I think Alexander Volkanovski has a legitimate chance of winning this fight because he can use his experience at that particular point of the fight. And not only with the experience, but Volkanovski has one of the best cardiovascular endurance gas tanks in the UFC today on the main roster. And he's very experienced in the championship rounds, in round 4, round 5. Diego Lopes doesn't know what it's like to get in those championship rounds with a UFC title on the line just yet. So that's why I think if Alexander Volkanovski, the weather the storm, round 1, round 2 is going to be very difficult if he doesn't get finished within those first 2 rounds. If it goes through round 3, round 4, round 5, he has a good chance of winning. He's used his experience and used his gas tank to get him by to possibly a decision victory or a finish to become the featherweight champion. So I think that's very important. And last but not least, Alexander Volkanovski has to let the hands fly. I mean, he got made famous by letting his hands fly. 13 victories come away of knockout in his MMA career. I think he's going to have to win the striking battle against Diego Lopes. I give him the advantage over Diego Lopes in the striking department. I think if he can do that, he can walk out of UFC 314 with that featherweight title. So those are the game plans that I have for Alexander Volkanovski to follow. Now going on with Diego Lopes. I think Diego Lopes has to let the hands fly. Now, I just talked about Alexander Volkanovski having the advantage in the striking department, but Diego Lopes is nothing to sneeze at with his lethal hands. I mean, he has dynamite explosive hands. And that's why I said that Diego Lopes is going to be the aggressor for the first 2 rounds based off of lefty and righty. Thunder and lightning as what Diego Lopes possesses in his hands. I mean, he has a dangerous right hand. He can land 1-2 combinations. He's really effective being a counter puncher because of how fast and explosive he is as a puncher. And obviously, I think that has to be the #1 game plan for Diego Lopes because, like I just said in the beginning of the segment, Alexander Volkanovski has got finished in his last 2 fights. And his chin has been exposed even more, with Islam Makhachev knocking him out in the first round in late 2023. Ilia Topuria knocking him out at UFC 298 in the beginning of 2024. So I think that is going to play a big factor with Diego Lopes letting his hands fly early in this fight. Now, next, I think Diego Lopes should bet on himself and try to get this fight to the ground. I think he has the grappling advantage over Alexander Volkanovski. He can take the fight to the ground, landing some takedowns and making Volk very uncomfortable on the ground. And honestly, if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I know Alexander Volkanovski is not the best submission artist, and he hasn't got a submission victory since 2015. But honestly, if this fight took place 2 to 3 years ago, I would say this is a bad idea for Diego Lopes. But Diego Lopes could take Alexander Volkanovski to the ground. I think he can out-grapple him. He has 12 victories come away with submission in his MMA career. So he knows what it's like to control the pace on the ground. He knows what it's like to make his opponents feel uncomfortable on the ground. He could gain some ground control on the mount, put on some pressure into submission holds and make Volk feel very uncomfortable. And again, Diego Lopes is very experienced because he's a second-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So he knows what he's doing on the ground. I think he should gamble on himself, take the fight to the ground. Every opportunity he can get to land some takedowns on Alexander Volkanovski, tire him out. And last but not least, Diego Lopes has to stay confident as the fight goes on. Now, why I say he has to be confident as the fight goes on, he already lacks that experience. Alexander Volkanovski has fought in the best in the featherweight division, and he lacks that experience because he has not stepped in the octagon with some all-time greats like Alexander Volkanovski has. When he's fought Max Holloway, when he's fought Ilia Topuria, Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo, they both fought Brian Ortega, but you guys get my point. He doesn't have that big-time experience like Alexander Volkanovski. However, I have seen Diego Lopes dig down deep. And when I've seen him dig down deep at UFC 306, if you guys watch the first minute and 30 seconds of that fight in the first round, honestly, I don't know how Brian Ortega did not get knocked out in that fight. But Diego Lopes gassed himself out in the first round, took time to get himself together, regrouped, and finished the fight as strong as he did in the first round of the fight. So if Diego Lopes could take his time, stay confident, stay cool, stay collected, keep his composure together, he has a good chance of defeating Alexander Volkanovski in the main event of UFC 314. So, this is a tough decision. With that being said, I'm going to go with Diego Lopes to defeat Alexander Volkanovski by decision to become the new featherweight champion at UFC 314. Now, I believe that Diego Lopes is going to be victorious against Alexander Volkanovski, and a new chapter will be written in this featherweight division with Diego Lopes winning the vacated featherweight title because Ilia Topuria moved up to lightweight. But I think Diego Lopes is going to win this fight based off of his hands, lefty, righty, thunder, lightning, like I just call his explosive dynamite hands. I think Diego Lopes is going to give Alexander Volkanovski a run for his money with his hands. He has a dangerous right hand, can land 1-2 combinations of ferocious counter puncher. I think he's faster and stronger than Alexander Volkanovski at this particular point of his UFC career. And I've just seen Volk get his chin tested, and the chin failed the test because he got knocked out in his last two fights against Islam Makhachev and Ilia Topuria. But I also trust Diego Lopes with this fight going to the ground as well because he has 12 victories coming way of submission in his MMA career. I think he landed takedowns on Alexander Volkanovski, be comfortable on the ground, whether it's on the mount and side control. He could gain some ground control points as well to his advantage and wear him out on the ground. I just think that if this fight was 2 to 3 years ago, I would obviously lean towards Alexander Volkanovski, but he's lost his last 3 out of 5 fights. And you're talking about Diego Lopes, who's been hungry for this opportunity, won his last 5 fights on the best run of his UFC career thus far. I think this is a dangerous matchup for Volkanovski, and I think we're going to see Diego Lopes win the vacated featherweight title at UFC 314. So that right there is my prediction for this weekend's fight taking place in the UFC between Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopes.